Mm. Even though we're waiting on that, can you hear me? Like, can we talk?
I'm sure, but we are streaming now.
Okay.
I wanted to start the stream just a few minutes or just to be sure that was working. So it's working. So
I've never seen that little we'll get the show started thing. Oh, you're sharing the screen. Oh, that's how you're doing it. Okay.
yeah, I figured that way it'll be a way to, as people are coming in, and also it gives sort of a blank spot to be in the video on YouTube and Facebook, so I don't have to edit all the talking out. It could just be sort of a blank screen, and people will skip it.
Yeah, I went ahead and shared the event link to Facebook, so we might have a few people from the Spark EV owners group chiming in and helping describe the awesomeness that is the Spark EV.
That would be great.
We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, I never know we never know who's going to show up for this stuff. From week to week, and put out the email and it's been on the Facebook page. It's been so. And I definitely want to try to, once this becomes more of like a quote unquote regular kind of thing, where I do like a couple of times a month, I might want to think about like how do I really publicize this thing so that way people know about it, and I'm not sure I'm not sure I have any good ideas for that. So
yeah, well, you and I can talk later about some ideas.
Buy a billboard. I put a billboard on I-95 or I-64 that says, "Want to know about EVs? Tune in every Saturday." You'll find out.
Well, I mean, if it's a regular thing, there's so much more we could do with this.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll
start somewhere.
I'll talk to you more about that later.
Cool. Hey, Jeffrey, I see you joined us.
Hey, yes, good to see y'all.
Awesome.
Hey, how's it going, man?
All right, it's all right.
Cool. Well, we'll get started in just a few minutes, as the slide so usefully points out. In the meantime, we are streaming live to Facebook and YouTube right now. Hopefully, I just checked. Actually, I should probably check again just to see. Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, it is working. Good.
Cool. I like how you did that, Charles, man. You are so cool.
I'm trying to be cooler than I actually am.
Well, because I attend a lot of the ERA, they use it as a presentation. You're using it as a group chat. But there's presentation mode, as you know, with Zoom. For that, it's perfect for streaming, but they can only do it Facebook because they do not use but the cool software that you use.
I know that Restream service is pretty neat. And I definitely recommend it. It's fairly easy to use because I looked at a couple of different things, and it was also, but unfortunately, there's a monthly fee involved. So it's like, I think it's like $9.99 a month or something like that. So that plus the $15 I'm paying for Zoom. So that's I think I have to think about sort of how to make this sustainable in the long run, because I don't necessarily mind spending this extra money right now, but I've really been trying to resist, basically spending my own money a lot, So we'll figure.
Well, and the appeal of grabbing just, it's only $10 a month or only $15 a month, and then you end up with 10 of those. You're like,
it adds up.
Welcome to the land of streaming.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I'm working with photo editing software, a subscription to Adobe for stock images, of course, the web page. Like I've got like 4 or 5 different things. Of course, it's all coming out of the EV resource budget, but it's it's interesting that it adds up, and you go, "Wow, am I really doing all of this?" Then you start to go, "Okay, is it really worth it?" But I've tried to take individual things out of the mix, and I run into trouble, and I'm going, "Okay, it really does make life so much easier to have it."
Absolutely.
But I don't have this streaming sharing software you're talking about, Charles. So you're gonna have to show me that.
It's actually not software, because I did look at that. It's actually software you can get to. This particular one is all web based. So you just open it up. You just create an account, log onto a website, a web page, and then you put in information about the streams that you want to use, and I wanted to be sure it was like a U.S. reputable company, because actually this Restream has access to your Facebook and YouTube account, so it's essentially hosting there, so it has posting access. So there were some other services I was clear on, like who exactly was the company, and then so I wanted to be careful about who has access to this platform. So
Chinese intelligence.
Yeah, right. Well, it's 2:00, but we're going to wait just another minute or two to get started. Make sure this is playing too. And we'll get rolling.
The last time I got to go outside, apart from taking out or in the trash, was when I gave you guys the demo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to. So I made the mistake of initially not driving my car much at all, and it killed my battery.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Not the main traction battery, but the 12 volt. So and I didn't think it was, but so then and I had no way of starting the car, so I had to get it towed to get the battery replaced. So
you can't jump start it.
You can, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that. There's a certain way to do it, and I just said, I'm just gonna, because I actually wasn't convinced it was the battery, because it went through the startup capability. Like the display came on and the radio came on. So I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe it's not that, and I looked on different things online and said it could be battery, it might not be battery. I said, look, I'm just going to take it to the dealership and see what they say.
Sure.
And sure enough, it was the battery. So
yeah.
So now what I've been trying to do is every day, and that brought out my wife's car too. So we've been trying to drive each other's car, like drive like one vehicle, like we'll alternate between the two. So one day we'll use mine, one day we use hers, so that way it's not sitting.
Well, see, one thing I learned about as an early Leaf adopter, Nissan Leaf, those especially, that accessory battery, and plus it's a small battery, it's not a full-size battery, but if you did have the full-size battery, at least you would have a little bit of a leeway. But here's the thing, the Leaf, any timer, it's pinging just the accessory battery. Any ODB device, it's pinging that battery. And so whenever I put my Leaf into long-term storage, turn off all the timers, unplug all of the ODB stuff. Just keep it as dead as you can, because it will drain that battery on anything.
Or get a smart charger.
Yeah.
I read about that. Yeah, I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Keep your 12 battery topped off. So I was like, wow, interesting.
Yeah, but if you got no timer and you got the smart charger, yeah, that'll do it.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. It's 2 minutes after 2. I know I'm going to be respectful of your time, and obviously the folks that are watching us on YouTube and Facebook right now. So whoever those people might be. My name is Charles Jarina, as you guys already know. But for those who don't, I'm the lead organizer for Drive Electric RVA. We promote electric vehicles as a fun and practical transportation alternative that also helps combat climate change and reduce air pollution. Thank you for joining us. I gotta say that, in the absence of public events where we can connect with electric vehicle owners and enthusiasts, we've been broadcasting live via Zoom, as well as to our Facebook and YouTube pages. So I invite you to check us out on either of those social media platforms, as well as on Twitter, Instagram, Meetup, whatever we're trying. I think what platform we're not on, but we try to be like everywhere.
Vimeo.
Vimeo, there you go. I should have a Vimeo channel. All right, so I want to acknowledge that this has been a tough week for a lot of people, and the fact that you folks that are watching this now and will be watching this in the weeks to come are taking the time to learn about EVs and connect with each other who have an interest. to me, that speaks volumes to the promise of this technology to change the world. Because there's so many other things that are going on that they're, you argue are more important, but the fact is that the negative impacts of climate change and air pollution aren't going away, even with a lot of gasoline cars that have been idle during the pandemic. So it's imperative to accelerate the electrification of transportation. So with that, a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation. Save your questions until the end, but feel free to use the chat function in Zoom to post your thoughts and questions on the fly. So I'm going to turn things over to Zack Hurst. I first met Zack several years ago I think it was when you were an insurance agent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And he was interested in learning more about EVs, and he saw an opportunity to develop an expertise that could serve EV owners well as make a profit. So since then, Zack's become a passionate, well-versed advocate for electric vehicles. He bought a Chevy Spark EV online, and he'll talk more about that during his presentation. He also founded EV Resource to help others in their journey to EV ownership, creating an informative website, weekly podcast, which I think is going online like as we speak today, and then also an online magazine that you can subscribe to. So I thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Zack.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate having the opportunity to always talk about EVs and the benefits thereof, and more specifically today to talk about the car that I actually bought a year ago. It's been a year now that I've been driving around this Chevy Spark EV, and yes, I will get closer to it, I promise. But this is a good shot profile view from the back. But yeah, the Chevy Spark EV, it was used. This is a 2016, so it was about 3 years old when I got it. It had 28,000 miles on it. I have now just about doubled that in a year. And it is easily one of the best decisions that I have made when it comes to not only personal transportation, but also just from an enthusiast passion aspect. Owning this car really was the inspiration to share with as many people as I could about how great electric vehicles are, and kind of as a little dig, how much better they are than the traditional gas and diesel powered vehicles. So basics about the Chevy Spark EV, it is a smaller car. And I'm gonna actually turn my camera around if I can to share that a little bit easier. So it is a smaller car. It is based on the gas powered Spark. So it shares the same body, same chassis, but it is entirely electric. So it's not a hybrid. A lot of people think that it is a hybrid. It is entirely full battery electric vehicle when it's brand new. Okay, so back in 2016, the EPA rating for this was 82 miles of range, which compared to EVs of today, doesn't sound like a whole lot. I mean, now you can get Teslas or the newer Kona or the newer Leaf, and you're going to have 200 plus miles. Well, 82 miles, believe it or not, is plenty to be able to go as far as I need to go on a daily basis and have much room left over. So you can kind of see the styling of the back. Of course, I did put all of the graphics on there to represent the brand, and got the windows tinted as well, which was very helpful. And I won't get into that, but on a hot 80-degree day, you want to have tinted windows. It does have the option for DC fast charging. So that would be right there. Of course, I'm plugged in, charging on level 2 SEMA Connect chargers right now. And actually, unlike a lot of the newer EVs and all Teslas, this, because it was based on a gas-powered car, does have everything up front just about in the engine compartment. All of the motor, inverter, controllers, everything is up here. The battery pack is underneath the back seat where the gas tank would have been. So it's not a ground up EV. It is definitely something that was designed originally as a gas car, and Chevy made this an electric vehicle basically to conform with the emissions regulations from California. It's a compliance car. Originally, it was only sold on the West Coast in California and Oregon, which made it really, really hard to find here in Richmond, Virginia. So what I actually did was got online and looked for electric vehicles in the price range that I wanted. And I ended up finding Carvana. If you're not familiar with Carvana, you can go on their website and browse a bunch of different models, and they will bring the car directly to your door. They'll give you a week and 400 miles to try it out, see if you like it. So this Spark actually was the second one. The first one, I was having a lot of trouble charging and it smelled a little funny. So we turned it in and got this, and it has been great. Over the course of the last 12 months, the only money I have spent, aside from plugging it in overnight at home, has been front tires. It actually still has the same rear tires that I got when I bought it. Now, in terms of cargo space, you can see here, not much to choose from. I'm going to turn this around again. It is a small car. So if you don't like small cars, this is not the EV for you. But if you, like I, just commute to and from work, it's just you and your stuff, then this is plenty. The rear seats do fold down. So if you need more cargo room, you can have it. It does sit or seat 4 passengers. It is not a 5-seater, which, you know, for a family of 5, that was a brilliant choice. But, you know, anytime I need to, I can fit the kids in the back seat and put my oldest up front. Of course, she's old enough, and drive around. And unfortunately, my wife won't be able to be in the car, but that's what the roof rack's for, right? No, I'm kidding. So, yeah, it's that's kind of the basics of the Spark EV. There's a lot of other things I probably could say on the performance end. It is a little hot hatch. It's got 327 pound-feet of torque, which I had to spring for some super sticky tires up front to keep the wheels from spinning, because I like to get my foot into the accelerator quite a bit. So it's torquey, it's quick. Of course, all EVs have that immediate instant reaction. When you step on the accelerator, it's just going to launch forward. You don't have to wait for the engine to get up into a proper RPM band or a turbo to spool up or anything like that. So it's very, very fun, affordable. I actually put a YouTube video out recently that this is what I think, and of course my opinion is biased, but I think this is the best commuter car that you can get today. When I bought it last year, this was an $11,000 car. So I know you want me to speak to the benefit of buying used. Well, there is a huge benefit. The car payment on an $11,000 car for this was less than what I was previously spending on gas every month. So this translates out to essentially just about a free car. It was almost a wash after calculating the gas savings, maintenance savings. The insurance was basically the same. A lot of people think that insurance for EVs is higher. It's not necessarily true. Insurance companies look at the total value of the car, not necessarily what's powering it. You know, if you go out and buy an $80,000 Model S, well, yeah, you might be paying more than your Camry. But buying used, I've never bought a new car in my life, and I'm not sure I'd want to because of the depreciation aspect of it. But for $11,000, and you can still find these with less than 30,000 miles in that same price range, around $11,000. The only caution I would say to buying used is how to determine what it's like in terms of the battery life or battery degradation. That is probably the biggest caution I would have for anybody buying a used car. Of course, you have to check out all the other aspects of the suspension and braking and everything like you would any kind of car, even a gas-powered car. But with EVs, when you're buying used, there are certain apps you can download for your phone and have a device that actually will plug into the car. One is Torque Pro, that's available for Android. But you can read out what the state of health is for the battery. So it's not going to be at 100%. The day I bought this car, being 3 years old, it did not have the same battery capacity that it would have back in 2016 when it was made. And furthermore, now, a year later, after I've honestly abused it when it comes to charging, there was times where I would be fast charging it every single day, multiple times a day. I could tell you that this does not have the same battery capacity that it did. So that 82-mile estimated range, it's probably less than that if you're going to drive the EPA test. However, one great thing about the Spark EV that I found is it's not hard to beat that number. This car is much, much more efficient than what was revealed during the EPA tests. I have regularly been able to drive and get up close to 100 miles per charge had I kept going. Yeah, I mean, say what you want about the EPA range tests. I think a lot has been said about other vehicles for that. But if you drive like a bat out of hell and you're going like crazy all the time, then your range is going to suffer. And if you drive like grandpa, then obviously you're going to be able to go a little bit further. I don't know, Charles, what else do you want me to add on to that? That's kind of
well, I don't think anybody can, from what you're saying, can accuse you of driving like a grandpa. So,
well, sometimes.
I'm sort of in between too. If you could touch on some of the, I guess for lack of a better term, some of the quirks of the Spark EV, the things that the quirks that are the unique aspects that you like, and maybe some of the things that maybe you wish you could change if you were omnipotent and own GM, could make them like re-engineering your car.
Sure. Well, I mean, the quirks, the things that I really like, I mentioned, of course, the power that it has. What I don't like on the performance aspect is that it's limited to 90 miles an hour top speed. Now, most people aren't going to care about that. That's just something that I've always liked to have more on the top end, or more importantly, to not reach the limit of what the car can do, because it's got enough power to do more than that. They just limit it electronically. So I love the power aspect. I love the fact that it's active thermal cooling on the battery pack. So unlike some EVs, and I won't point that out, Charles, unlike some EVs, they don't have that active thermal management on the battery pack. So they will likely see higher levels of degradation over the course of their life. Chevy did a really good job maintaining the way the battery keeps a healthy state of charge over time. Before we got started, yeah, there you go, Jeff. Jeffrey. Before we got started today, we were talking a little bit about what you guys were doing during the whole coronavirus stuff and not having your car plugged in and having a battery die. Well, Chevy actually recommends to maintain the 12-volt battery in this, that even if it's at 100% state of charge, to keep it plugged in. And the electronics and everything will actually maintain the battery the way it is. So my suspicion is that they might keep a little bit of the battery capacity as a buffer at the top end, so that 100% that I might see on the car isn't necessarily 100% truly. Now, one thing, I'll actually get in here. One thing I do love is, let me turn the AC off because that's not going to help. The way all of this is set up, and I don't know if you can see that very well. Oh, there's a glare. Okay. Over here, it can tell me as I'm driving what my consumption is. Oh, there, I'll close the door so it's not dinging at us. So right now I can see that I'm charging at about 2 kilowatts. That's because I'm plugged in and I'm charging, but I can actually see what the rate is. Now, likely that's not going to be as much as what I'm actually pulling out of the charger, because of course I just turned the car on. So some of the electronics are going to be using energy. For example, if I turn the AC on, we will likely see that too drop. So now the car is using a little bit of that energy. What it's showing is the amount of energy that's putting back into the battery. Then on this side, I can see the state of charge on the battery, showing that I've got 43 miles left and about 60% battery. And that's because of the way I drive. Yes, I know the back. Okay, I'm trying to go through those. So over the last 31 miles, I've been averaging 4.8 miles per kilowatt, which a lot of EV owners would be very happy with 4.8 miles per kilowatt. I, however, am not, because this car is capable. I've had it up over 8 miles per kilowatt before. That is something I love about this car. It was actually, when it was new, it was the most efficient EV on the market. I think the actual equivalent to miles per gallon that I've been able to get out of this is over 250 miles per gallon equivalent, which, as an efficiency nut, I love the numbers, and it's really hard to find anything that you can beat for that, especially at this price point. Other than that, the things that I don't like, the seats, they are economy seats. The Spark, even the gas-powered Spark, it is an economy car. It is not a luxury vehicle. So the seats aren't the most comfortable. During the summertime, I like to have a pad between me and the seat to help keep my back off of the seat, because it'll really, it heats up way too much. But it does have heated seats, so in the wintertime, I can actually take advantage of that and not have to turn the heat on as much as possible. So I can turn the heated seats on, and it's great for that. The stereo isn't something that, if you want, a high quality stereo, that's not going to do it. It's definitely leaves some to be desired. But for me, I listen to talk radio and podcasts all the time, so I don't need a great stereo. The infotainment, I'll turn the car back on again here. Gives a lot of information that I like. I'm a geek, so I like to have info. Here, let me close that again. Turn that around. If it will listen to me, there you go. So I can actually see, since its last full charge, how much energy I've used. Now that, if it doesn't charge to 100%, that doesn't reset. So in order to get that to reset, it has to be 100% charged. But then for charging, I can set the charge level to 8 amps or set it to 12. I can't see what I'm doing here. So 12 amps, and that's when it's plugged in on level 1 AC charging. So 12 amps times 120 volts, of course, is, what is that? Now I have to do math. I'm not going to do the math. Somebody else can do the math. It's like what is that? 1.4 kilowatts? Yeah.
1.44.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Jeffrey. 1.4 kilowatts. The charging, I didn't even talk about the charging on this. On level 2 charging, so what I'm doing right now, it is limited. You're not going to get the 11 or some 3-phase AC 22 kilowatt charging out of this. But being that it has such a small battery, I can plug in even level 1 and almost have a full charge overnight. Level 2, you could get it done in between 5 and 7 hours. But the DC fast charging on this, it charges at 50 kilowatts, and it gets there quickly, and it sustains that quickly. So I have had this down to less than 1% state of charge and charged back up to 100%. It took 35 minutes. So the fast charging, the way they handle that with this car is great. Now, if I had a bigger battery, I would probably want a higher rate of charge than 50 kilowatts. But honestly, I haven't fast charged this car in months because I haven't had the point where I needed to have a full state of charge quickly. So I know this car originally, the DC fast charging was an extra option. It was not something that was included standard on the car. I know there are Spark EVs out there that do not have fast charging. If you are the type of person that you just drive maybe 20 miles to work and 20 miles home and do some grocery shopping every now and then, You don't even need fast charging with this. The 80 miles or even 70 miles or maybe 55 in the winter, that's plenty. It really is. The idea that you need to have a huge battery reserve for hundreds of miles of range is just not applicable to the majority of real world situations that you're going to find yourself in. Do I wish this car had a bigger battery? Yeah, because I would like to take it up to DC. And unfortunately, the charging infrastructure between here and there doesn't allow for me to take this car up there unless I plug into level 2 and wait for a couple hours to recharge. But that's a charging infrastructure issue. I don't take issue with the car. If there was a fast charger that I could use in Fredericksburg, I would make that trip probably regularly. So that's something to consider whenever you're buying any EV, whether it's new or used. Keep in mind what your normal trips are going to be every day. And then those occasional long distance trips, if all you have is an EV in the house, well, maybe go rent a car or get on Turo and rent a Tesla, and you can go, as far as you want. Charles, did you have anything else you wanted to ask about? Well, or anybody else? Anybody have questions?
I was going to say, let's open it to the folks that because I've seen a number of folks have joined us since we've been talking. John, Glenn,
hello everybody,
and, Ben. So thank you for joining us. So feel free to unmute yourselves, and if you guys have any questions about the Chevy Spark, now's your chance to do it.
Well, I mean, if I could just, my friend Zach, as you may know, I did rent from my good friend Jeff Schneider up there in Maryland a Spark. So I did drive it for about a week, and I enjoyed it, except because I drive 60 miles a day and at the time of use, and I only had about a 4-hour window to charge the car. I was finding myself every few days just hitting the supercharger to make up for the fact that I was like every day, just only getting so much.
Sure.
Other than that, it was a real fun thing to drive.
Cool. It does. I think it shows I think it makes a good point that when it comes down to is like what is important, right? And so because there was a webinar, I've been on a bunch of webinars lately that talked about, what are your priorities? Is it performance? Is it efficiency? Is it range? And for every person, it's different, just like any other variables that would come into purchasing a car. And I actually, I opened the floor to any other questions. And I had a question related to that. But John or Glenn or Ben, do you have any particular questions you want to throw to Zach about his car, or any thoughts?
So I purchased a used 2016 Chevy Volt about a year ago. Love it. And this is maybe a broader question about GM and Chevrolet, but I guess I'm curious, like what's next? From what I understand, they've discontinued a lot of their cars, and they're focusing on the Volt. So kind of what's next for GM? Because I from what you said about the Spark and from my experience with the Volt, like they make a good EV product.
Yeah. So generally you are right. Right now, Chevy, of course, stopped making the Spark in 2016 model year. That was the last year they made that. And then, of course, replaced it essentially with the Bolt. Well, the Volt, of course, this past year has reached its similar demise where they took that to the end of production. Right now, they are refreshing the Bolt. The 2020 Bolt actually has a slightly different range. It has I think it's 18 miles more of range for 259 miles total range. And then they're also coming out with the Bolt EUV, which is going to be a slightly larger option than the Bolt. So a little bit bigger of an SUV versus, I guess I would classify the Bolt being more of a crossover. Aside from that, that's all that I've heard right now for the Chevy brand. Now, GM does have some other EV plans with their other brands. Cadillac is going to have a rather large SUV that's full battery electric. What else am I missing? I'm missing a couple, actually, off the top of my head.
I know the Hummer, I guess they're trying to do.
Well, yes, of course.
Yeah, the GMC.
Yes. The Hummer EV. I don't know why that would slip my brain. I guess just like everybody else, I'm not used to thinking about Hummer when you're thinking about electric vehicles. But they recently, GM and Mary Barra, the CEO, they had a big EV battery event where they have the Ultium battery technology that they're developing. Of course, they're working on their own version of Tesla's autopilot Super Cruise, that the Bolt EUV will be the first non-Cadillac GM vehicle to have that included. So they are working on it. They're getting there. I think Chevy, certainly when you look at all of the manufacturers and look at the scope of what has been done, and unfortunately a lot of it what hasn't been done, GM has really shown a commitment to slowly make their way towards that. I think other than GM and Volkswagen, well, and of course Tesla, you know, the legacy automakers just haven't caught on quite as well. But there are things in the works. So, by 2025, I don't even think we're going to be asking that question, because we'll have multiple options of vehicles now.
I think that's a great answer. I appreciate that. That's something I think about a lot. And I often tell my wife, like, a decade from now, we won't be talking about hybrid cars. We'll be talking about electric cars. And we're just, the market's just going to continue to increase. But, right now it's like a little bit of that impatient period of what's next.
Sure. And that's not to speak against hybrids at all. I am a huge fan of plug-in hybrids. I mean, the Volt is one of my favorite vehicles that I haven't had a whole lot of experience with. I'll add that little caveat. But I think with battery technology the way it is, the conversation about range, the fear that non-EV owners have about getting to where they are going to go, and they have this fear of running out of energy. I think that fear is going to go away the more people are aware that, the average daily trip in this country is less than 40 miles. You don't need all the battery that you think you do. And I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to that. At least within the EV community, people are really getting that fact.
And I'll follow on to that. The irony is that I think as people are starting to understand that they maybe don't need as much range, I think the economics are sort of going in the other direction. And because a lot of people were saying, why did they continue to Volt? They were selling Volts pretty well, right? But their GM, I read something that GM's argument was, well, it's more complicated to build. That it has to have both an electric drivetrain and a regular a gasoline engine. And so for them, it just made more sense to go all electric. And also, I think what's driving the market is bigger batteries means they can charge for a premium for that. And so the higher price tag. So you're starting to see the EV market moving into the SUVs and trucks. But what I'm hoping is that as they do that they also realize that and hopefully this will happen at the same time as the battery prices will continue to drop, so that they can then go back to the sedans and the smaller cars and the hybrids and make those cars more economically, and those become more profitable as well, because they definitely meet a part of the market for sure.
Well, and you mentioned profitability, and the Spark was never a vehicle that brought Chevy any profits. They lost money on every single one of them that they sold. The same thing can be said for the Fiat 500 electric. Now, I don't know about Nissan and the Leaf. I would imagine that having sold so many of them worldwide that they figured out a way to make a profit on it. But that is something that auto manufacturers still struggle with, is making a profitable EV. And to your point, I think that's why they're starting with the larger vehicles with the larger batteries, because trucks, SUVs, those are vehicles that have higher profit margins. A little Chevy Spark, I mean, you can buy the gas-powered Spark brand new for, what is it, like low 20s, I think, if that. So there isn't a whole lot of wiggle room when you go and have a EV Spark. There isn't that profitability. What am I thinking? Profit margin. There we go. So that's going to be the key. I think Volkswagen is going to be the company to look towards, considering that they have made that investment in the MEB platform for the majority of their sedans and smaller vehicles. I have yet to see many other manufacturers that are making the level of commitment that Volkswagen is. And I'm completely brand agnostic. I mean, I don't care what somebody drives as long as it's electric. As long as you can plug it in, then I'm happy. But in the meantime, what I think needs to happen from a mindset is that people need to realize that you don't need to go as far as you think you do, or have a battery that will take you as far as you think you do. 100 miles or 80 miles or 120 miles in like the Volkswagen e-Golf, that is plenty. And I think more people need to realize that. Even vehicles like the Chevy Volt or the upcoming Ford Explorer that's going to be a plug-in hybrid, those are great vehicles for people that might live out a little bit more further away from the city that need to get in. Well, you know what? You might use gas for the last 10 or 20 miles of your trip, but you didn't use gas for what, 40, 50 miles? Some of these hybrid plug-in hybrids have the range that's out there.
Gotcha. That was a good question, John. Thank you for that. And actually, Glenn is also on the call. He has a Chevy Bolt. So it's interesting. We have all the representation. We have a Spark, we have a Volt, and we have a Volt. So it's a whole spectrum there.
I bought I had a Chevy, pardon me, I had a Nissan Leaf. And it was great for getting, it had a range of about 100 miles. And I used it around town, and a couple of times I got it up to Williamsburg or Charlottesville, but there was a little range anxiety there because it was sort of pushing the limits. And the biggest concern then was you could get where you wanted to go, but where the hell were you going to charge your car when you got there? So I gave a presentation 2 weeks ago on the new Electrify America chargers, and that really solves that range anxiety issue. I bought a Bolt because it would go to my dad's house. He lives in North Carolina, and I just stopped once for a quick charge, and I'm good. And I think that I agree. I mean, most people can get by with 100 miles or less. And I tell everybody that's my friends, because most families have two cars. I said, your second car should be an EV. I mean, these days your first car can be an EV too, but there's no reason why your second car can't be an EV. And boy, with all the cars that have been leased, I mean, all those leased Leafs, for example, you can pick up a Leaf for very little, and use it as your everyday commute car, and just plug it in at night, whether it's 110 or 220, and you got cheap transportation. It never needs an oil change, and all you got to do is rotate the tires. So I mean, of course, we're all talking to the convertible, but
preaching to the choir.
But I do continually tell my friends that if you got two cars, one of them should be an EV, because, and of course, obviously, you don't have to have a gas powered car at all now, but just trying to get people used to the idea of EVs is important, because. And of course, we need a little help from the federal government too, and that's going to take a change of the administration. But I think those efficiency standards that are mandated are going to basically make EVs much more attractive to people. And Tesla's made them cool. That's good. And people like the Chevy Bolt. I took my car in to get the tires rotated to the local service station. I was worried that they might not like EVs, but they said, "Oh, that's a cute car."
That's great. Yeah, I think the biggest barrier that people have to the idea of EV adoption comes down to price. They still think that EVs are expensive. They're something that only the rich can afford. It's like this toy that you can go spend all your money on. But they're thinking of basically the Tesla Model S. I mean, they're thinking of cars that originally were over $100,000. They're not thinking about buying a used EV, where, as I said earlier, this was $11,000. You can find Spark EVs now for sale that the mileage is up there a little bit more, but you can find them for sale under $10,000. The cheapest one that I saw actually was around $6,500. So you're right there in the range of so many other used vehicles. I know you can get a used Nissan Leaf, the first gen Leaf, you can get for under $7,000 in some places in this country. I have seen Tesla Model S, the early years, the 2013s, I have seen those for less than $25,000. And you're buying a Tesla Model S at that price. And Teslas, I think, have really shown that the fear of buying used and being worried about the battery health, Teslas have shown that their batteries can last many, many, many years for hundreds of thousands of miles. I think the only reason we haven't seen so many other manufacturers prove that point, that the batteries are really much more robust than people think, is because people don't drive that much in other EVs. So, you know, I've only got not even 60,000 miles on this car. I plan on having it as long as I can. You know, I would love to put over 100,000 miles on this car, if not just to make a point that it's possible, and that even at that point, especially at that point, you don't have to worry about maintenance the way you do with a gas-powered car. You can go out there and buy an EV that has 200,000 miles, and you don't have to worry about changing a timing belt or water pumps or, you know, some of these things that with a gas-powered car, you'd almost have to really, really want it to buy something with 200,000 miles on it. So buying a used EV, if anything, should give people a greater opportunity for transportation than the gas-powered equivalent.
Thank you for making that point, because particularly for those who will be watching this later on YouTube and Facebook, because another webinar I've been on recently was talking about equity issues and trying to find ways to broaden the market for electric vehicles, and definitely having a robust used market, I think, is a critical part of that. So that, because there are people who are used to buying used cars if they want to get in a car, a beater, so to speak, you know, just so that it kind of gets you around. You're not so concerned about it. So EVs sort of need to be in that space too. And there are policy levers about that. You know, like for example, the EV rebate that was proposed in Virginia and not approved in the last General Assembly would have applied to used vehicles as well as to new vehicles. Yep. As much, but it was still been applied to that. So the idea is, there's no reason why you should incentivize buying used. And in fact, that addresses issues of making the technology more broadly available, not just to sort of the rich Tesla owner that sort of tends to be the stereotype. So.
Well, and you don't even have to be rich to have a Tesla anymore. I mean, the Model 3 is just barely above the average new car price point. I mean, they just lowered the price. You can get a Model 3 now for less than $38,000 for the standard range plus. So, yeah, I mean, you know, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, if we're going to be able to find owners that are willing to give up their cars and put them into the used market, I mean, the Model 3 5 years from now, I think, will be that sub $20,000, $15,000 used car that has plenty of life left in it.
Good point. And that's why I say it was definitely a stereotype, because yes. I think the Model 3 kind of proves that out, and the why to some degree as well. Ben, did you have any particular questions about the Spark, or anything that you're curious about?
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I pretty much settled on a Leaf 2018, and I'm trying to check my math here, but typically the depreciation on these things is pretty steep. And it goes, right now you could get a 17 Leaf S or an SV for $13,000, $14,000. And I'm hoping with the announcement of the 21s for sale, the 18s will come down into that range. Anybody want to check my logic here?
Well, I mean, I'll just say this. I mean, I remember as a Leaf owner, the depreciation curve on a car, normal ICE cars like that, Jeep is like that, and then the Tesla's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I've seen generally, electric vehicles do tend to depreciate greater across the board than gas-powered cars. But then again, it does vary quite a bit, make to make and model to model. And then also you get to a point where you're going to have a depreciation curve. It might be quite steep the first couple years, but then it'll tend to flatten out as you get further away from when the car was new. To use the Chevy Spark EV as an example, this year, 1 year after I bought that, I can go and sell that if I had the same miles on it, granted. But I could sell it for more than what I paid for it. They're still around the same cost. If I had 26,000 miles on this, I could probably make $200 and sell it. So the depreciation curve is really flat when you get to a certain point. I've seen that with the first generation Leaf as well, that once you get down to that $10,000 price point, depending on the condition of the vehicle, that depreciation curve really flattens out. So I think it really depends on what you're looking for. And, if you're buying a car that's a year or two old, you're going to see greater depreciation than if you're buying a car that's 3, 4, or 5 years old.
Yeah, the federal incentive, I think, it paints a bad picture of the car, because what people do is 2 years, they subtract that from the value of the car right off the bat.
Right.
Yeah. So the time I'm looking, as soon as the 21s are announced, I'm going to try to go out and find a deal on an 18 3-year-old, and I'll let you know whether I'm successful or not.
Sure. Yeah, definitely follow up with that. I'd love to see if you're able to find, something that you feel is worth what you're getting for it.
Yeah.
Hey, as Zach mentioned, obviously VW is coming out with a big push on EVs, and they're going to have a wide range of them. And I've been looking anxiously at I don't know whether I can afford it because I think it's going to be overpriced, but the old minibuses are coming back as EVs. I put the link in there. It's a pretty cool looking car. I've seen a prototype driven, and it is one cool looking car which could be converted into the old campers, the old hippie campers. So I put a link in. I put a link in.
The kick in the pants.
That's right.
I read the other day that Tesla had one of the California cars, obviously top of the line. They just went 400,000 miles on it, and they kept meticulous records on what they spent. And 400,000, and that got them about 29,000 in expenses, mostly tires. So this is a car that they would use to take people to and from the airport. It was always on the road, but that car went not only went, but is going 400,000 miles.
Yeah, that exact vehicle, one of the hosts of Electrek, the website and podcast, he actually, I believe, bought that Model X, because I know he said it had over 400,000 miles on it. But other than that, I mean, EVs are going to change the way we think about high mileage cars, because you could have 400,000 miles on a car and really not expect to spend all that much more in terms of maintenance than when the car was brand new.
Yeah, the big driver was tires.
Yep. Yeah, EVs do go through tires faster than gas-powered cars, typically because they're heavier, or that people like me who drive around and just step on the gas pedal and spin them all the time. That's the reason I went through tires. But they're just heavier vehicles. So I think the tire companies will need to tweak, I guess, the compound so that the tires will last a little bit longer. But even then, I'm perfectly okay spending a little bit more on tires because I'm not spending that money on everything else.
Yeah. Well, you guys, if you hear any deals on an 18, you can find me right here on. I'll see you next month. I'm ready to go. The Chargers on the wall.
I was going to say that the advice I would give you is definitely, I mean, Zach mentioned this earlier. I think it was probably before you had joined in the call. Carvana is a really good resource because, they actually will, if you pick out the car and you decide this is the car I want, and you don't necessarily want to test drive it, I mean, you can buy the car and they deliver it to you, or you can go and pick it up at some, I think they have locations where you can also go and pick up the car as well. But also use cars.com. I always recommend.
Yeah, I've worn them out. I'm just waiting for 21 to roll around.
So,
I got you.
Ben, one other website that I would recommend to you is myev.com. That's MYEV. They are like cars.com, but they're only for electric vehicles and hybrids. So you will find private owners selling used vehicles. I don't know why I didn't mention this before. It just didn't pop into my head. But myev.com is a great resource for people that are looking to buy or sell their EV.
Okay.
So that would be one I'd recommend for you as well if you haven't already seen that.
You would have to have the car shipped to you?
So that they would, I mean, either shipping if you're buying it from somebody that's, you know, at a distance, but they also, just like cars.com, you can set up a radius around you and see who is selling a car that's closer. So you potentially could go to look at whatever vehicle you are interested in.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. So I did want to throw a question out there because you touched on this earlier about, Zach, about you know, your experience of range. It's been better than expected. Since we have some other EV owners on the call, I figured they may be useful for Ben, but also for those others folks that will be watching this video either live streaming now or later. What's been your experience in terms of the range? Was it better or worse than the EPA estimate? So,
it depends very much on how I'm driving and if I'm turning the air conditioning or the heat on. In the wintertime with the heat on, that for this car anyway, uses more than 20% of the energy is directed directly towards keeping the cabin hot enough, which I ended up getting to the point where I stopped using the cabin heater. I just used the heated seats, and I went out and bought a heated blanket to plug into the 12-volt socket to keep my legs warm. And then I just wore a jacket. That's probably more extreme than most people want to do, but I have been an efficiency nut for many years. Even before I was into EVs, I had a purpose-built Honda Civic that I changed the aerodynamics and stripped it out completely. It got over 80 miles per gallon on the highway. So comfort is not something that is necessarily important to me, other than just not freezing in the middle of the winter. But the range, if you drive really easy, you don't accelerate quickly, you just very smooth acceleration. If the light turns red a quarter mile ahead of you and you see that the cars are starting to stack up, don't wait to the last second to brake. You know, those kind of things that work in gas-powered cars work in EVs as well, to just eke out that efficiency. The way EVs are significantly different from gas cars when it comes to efficiency is the faster you go, the more energy you use. Where gas cars on the highway typically will get better gas mileage than when they're in the city. EVs are the opposite. If you're going around town, are going to have much, much further at city speeds of a range than if you're going on the highway. If I take this car on the highway, especially because the aerodynamics in the back are so chopped off, it's not a smooth tapered edge like a teardrop would be. If I take this on the highway, I've got maybe 60 miles of range at 60 miles an hour. And well, that's about right, because the time I went out to Charlottesville, it was about that much. So that is really, if you like your range, avoid high speeds, you know, that's 60, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. You're going to be using a lot more energy than you would if you're going 45. It just depends. You know, if you've got the battery and you have the energy that you know you can use, just be mindful that you're choosing to use it in that way.
So let's go real quick to Jeffrey, John, and Glenn, like what your experience has been with range.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, before I got my EV, I studied physics, and I looked up, you know, air resistance, the power cubed, V cubed velocity. Yep. And rolling resistance, it's linear, so that's not too bad. And then the momentum, that is the square. So the thing is that with the electric car, you've got those are your main issues, and your power for the motor is just linear power, you know, more power. But with the gasoline car, it's around that 50,000 RPM anyway. And so it likes, with the gears getting to the right level, it likes sitting at that 45, 55 miles an hour, because that's where the engine runs at its sweet spot. So yes, it has the same drag coefficients, but because it's operating at its sweet spot and, you know, uses less, it isn't working as hard as it has to in the lower RPMs. That's why they're better at the 45 and we're better at the 25 or the 20 or the 10 for that matter. But my experience is with the Leaf, you know, I had to hypermile it to get the 60 miles and back again, especially in the winter. You know, that's a lot of regen braking. That's drive 55. But with the Tesla and all of its big fat battery, man, oh man, I'm lucky if I get 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour. 3.0 miles per kilowatt hour is pretty common. So.
All right, how about you, Glenn? What's been your experience? Has the range been what the EPA say was going to be? Has it been better or worse?
Yeah, it really is directly related to how fast and how you drive. And I never was a speedster, and now I'm older, I'm even less so. So I guess the one thing, as Zach said, in the wintertime, my wife said, please turn on the heat, because I would drive without the heater, because the heater is a big electricity suck. But generally my car gets, with the Chevys, and I saw it on Zach's Spark too, it gives you, a range. It basically gives you the estimated mileage for a normal driver, and it gives you a high end in terms of a efficient driver, and then a low end if you are driving fast. And I usually can meet the middle ground area there in terms of driving, sometimes a little better. Obviously, winter has an impact on it, and heat and air conditioning do as well. Interestingly enough, I thought air conditioner would be a bigger drag than heat, but it seems like the heat pulls down power more than the air conditioner. At least I've noticed that. I haven't had actually, I haven't had this bolt in the summertime. I got it last September, so I haven't really put it to the test. But I know on my Leaf, it seemed like running the heat was a bigger drag on the engine than air conditioning, which I thought was kind of unusual. But that was true. And obviously, all these cars do have heated seats, so that really helps in terms of using that instead of the blower.
To that point, the heat, the big reason why the heat uses so much more electricity is a lot of EVs are using resistance heaters versus a heat pump, like you would find in the Tesla Model Y. So that's something that I think as more and more manufacturers figure out how to make it work, they'll switch over to using a heat pump. Because, I mean, Tesla has shown that with the Model Y is, bigger than the Model 3, but it's just as efficient because they made that change.
Cool. And I'll just throw this in real quick from my experience with the Leaf, my Leaf. I have a 2013 Leaf. And, the EPA says, I think it was like 86 miles, 84 miles, something like that. And it's pretty much been right at that, because I think I'm sort of tend to be kind of middle of the road kind of driver. And that, I have a bit of a lead foot at times, but I also don't. And I did this in my previous car too. I tend to not, until it got really hot in the summer, I wouldn't run my AC, because I like to roll the windows down, kind of feel the air, which of course it does increase the drag some too. But I found that the estimate, I think the EPA tends to be conservative with their estimates, which I think is a good thing, because I think at the end of the day, I think it'd be better for people to have a better experience, like get better range. And that's what sort of anecdotally I've heard from EV owners, that they tend to get a better range than what they expected from what the EPA said, because they tend to kind of keep it on the mid to low end. And so, but again, as everyone is saying, it all depends on how you drive, what the temperature is.
The EPA has a specific cycle, and it's all low velocity. The entire LA cycle that they use to estimate your mileage is actually a low speed. It does not use much highway. I mean, they do have a highway thing, but for the most part, the big EPA numbers are based on that LA model of low speed efficiency.
I did not know that. Good point. Well, it's 2:58, so I'm just going to start wrapping things up here. Thanks for coming. For especially John for joining us this particular week, and for others for coming back. Please email me at driveelectricriva@mail.com if you have any feedback or suggestions for other ways we can connect with EV owners and enthusiasts online. Also, let me know if you're interested in showing off your electric vehicle in a future event. Although I think most of you have already done that, so I guess I should probably skip that part. My remarks. Before you go, I did want to invite you to become a member of our chapter of the Electric Auto Association. There are several perks of membership, including a monthly e-newsletter that's packed with the latest news and information on EVs, and we're actually in the process of revamping it into a newsletter, e-newsletter type format. So it'll be much more modern and dynamic and lots of new content in it. So the base membership costs only $35 a year, and that helps chapters like ours in terms of having them take care of the insurance for us, and there's other things that the EAA, Electric Auto Association, does to support its chapters, and so that money really helps with that process. So I would encourage you. You can sign up at bit.ly/join DERVA. That's bit.ly/join DERVA. And also, if you're interested in solar energy to refuel your electric car, or if you already have solar panels on your roof like I do, you may want to know about an effort that will sort of toss out net metering programs on the state level, including right here in Virginia. I'm not going to get into it right now because it would take another half an hour just to talk about it, but go to votesolar.org and find out more. Basically, there's an effort to basically federalize to have the control over that excess energy that a residential solar system would be putting into the grid, rather than the state regulating that. So check that out and find out a little bit more. Our next two sessions are set for June 6th. We'll have RVA Tuk Tuk. They're going to talk about electric tuk-tuks and that they've bought and they rent out for different kinds of events, and sort of how they try to build a sustainable business model based on that. And on June 13th, we'll have John Baker and his Chevy Volt. He'll talk about plug-in hybrids, because he's definitely a big fan of plug-in hybrids and their value. Beyond that, we might take a little pause and shift this event to a monthly affair if the state relaxes its restrictions on large public gatherings, and it's a big if we feel like we can have public events that are like we get done safely, because I don't want to have events and invite EV owners and they're going to feel uncomfortable. So we'll wait for the timing to be right. It seems like things are moving in the direction of June, mid-June-ish, late June-ish, so we'll see. So we have these planned out at least till mid-June. But if you have ideas for other topics we should cover, because we'll keep doing this maybe less frequently. So if you have other ideas for topics or cars you'd like to see profiled, maybe I can find an owner who has that and maybe they can show it. Just email me at driveelectricrva@mail.com. With that, I'll say have a great Saturday, everyone, and please be safe, because it's definitely a crazy world out there.
Thank you, Charles. Awesome again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.